The last 10 years have seen an incredible upswing in people's interest in workforce planning. Now, historically, workforce planning has had its ups and downs. If you went back to the 70s, the majority of Fortune 500 companies in the United States of America had fully developed workforce plans. Now it's less than 50%, but the number is rapidly rising. And there's a simple reason for this, and the reason is on the diagram that you see in front of you. We are running out of people. In the Western world, the fertility rates that countries have, and in Australia it's about 1.7, 1.8, that's not enough to meet the declining numbers of people entering the workforce due to the fact that the baby boomers are retiring. And if you look at this diagram that you'll see that round about the year 2000, we're adding close to 170,000 new people per annum to the workforce. If you look forward only a few years, you'll see that we get down to the point where we're adding less than 20,000 new people to the workforce per annum. Now, what we mean by adding new people to the workforce is that every year a certain number retire and a certain number enter the workforce, either through becoming old enough to work or because they've joined the workforce from overseas. And in fact, if you look at this graph, when I look at that, I'm glad that in sometime in the next 20, 30 years, I'm going to be retired, because if you think of how difficult it is to get the people that you're looking for right now, look forward to that graph and it just gets tougher and tougher and tougher. And so what that means is that people have turned to workforce planning as an approach to try to deal with this issue. The days of simply being able to put an ad in the paper to find the talent that you want are drawing to a close. And what that means is that people are understanding that they need to take a more planned approach to doing this. And so we have, in many different organisations, developed workforce plans. And here's the SACS model of workforce planning. We tried to make it as simple as we possibly could, because many workforce planning models are extremely complicated. And when they're complicated, what it means is that the stakeholders who are involved lose track of where they are in the process and they become disengaged. Also, one of the things that I think people need to understand is that workforce planning is not just about a plan. Workforce planning is about changing your organisation to becoming fully proactive about the way you manage your people management issues. So it's not about just designing, structuring, strategizing. It's about changing the way that you manage people. A good way of looking at it is this diagram. You see on the left-hand side, you have your current state and then some environmental factors that are surrounding that current state. Now, the current state might be the composition of your current workforce in terms of demographics. It might be issues such as your staff turnover. It might be issues such as the mix of talent that you have on board. It might be issues such as the gender balance that you have. It could be whether you're part-time or you're full-time. And also you'll have some environmental factors surrounding all of that. Those environmental factors could be your legislative environment. They could be to do with the talent that's available through the types of people that are being produced by universities. It could be to do with whether you're in the middle of a city or in a regional and rural location. It could be to do with legislative changes that are putting different requirements on your workforce. But quantifying and qualitatively assessing your current workforce is an incredibly valuable exercise, because you will find gaps very often through that. We were working with a client not long ago. This client had about 25% staff turnover, but when we profiled the demographic of that organisation, we also discovered that because of their age profile, there was a distinct possibility that in 1 year, in the next 6 or 7 years, they would lose in excess of half of their entire workforce in 1 year. Now, for them, this was a very important learning. Once you've understood the composition of your current workforce and the environmental factors surrounding that, then what you need to do is identify the workforce that you're going to need in the future in order to be able to deliver your outcomes. And that's why strategy is so important in workforce planning. And it's really interesting when you work with client organisations from a workforce planning point of view, what you often find is that organisations might have tactics or mission, vision and values, but sometimes they don't have true strategy. True strategy says, in the next 3 years, we are going to be in this business and we will need to be this size and we will need to have these people on board. Now, surrounding that future state, of course, are some environmental factors. And those environmental factors might be changes in the legislative environment. They might be changes in the availability of talent. Based on some of the stats that we showed you before, it may well be a scarcity issue that you're going to deal with that's going to become more severe. Now, we're often asked about the question of duration. How far out in the future should you look from a workforce planning point of view? Really interesting around the world now, research is showing that strategy processes are becoming shorter. In other words, where we might have had workforce plans in the past that went for 10 years, what you're tending to find these days is workforce plans that go for 2 years. And the reason for that is that it's virtually impossible to predict with accuracy beyond 2 to 3 years. On average, in the United States of America, recent research into accuracy of organisational predictions shows that they're wrong 30% on average. Well, if you're going to compound a 30% error over the course of 6 or 7 years, then it becomes a nonsense. So we suggest to people that they use their workforce plans over 2 years. They forecast 2 to 3 years as an absolute maximum, and then they have a rolling reforecast. We suggest that you harmonise your workforce plans with your budgeting process, and what that means is that you've got something that doesn't look strange or different outside of the normal sequence of events, but you're really running that process harmonised with your normal business planning process, and so it becomes part of the fabric of your organisation. Finally, down the bottom, you see the question of enablers. Enablers are things like your process and culture. And because we're in the organisational psychology business, what we do is we work with you to understand your leadership practices, your people development practices, and what we're trying to do is to use that knowledge to allow you to get the two components of workforce planning right that really matter. And those two components are really your options in workforce planning, and those options are build or buy. To create the workforce of the future, you either build the workforce of the future through the training, development and coaching of your existing employees, or you're going to buy the workforce of the future through talent acquisition. Now, in practice, you need to do both, of course. You can't just build and you can't just buy. The people who succeed in this war for talent over the next 15 years are going to be the ones that harmonise both of those methods effectively. If you'd like to find out more about workforce planning and how to get involved, click at the link at the bottom of this video. You'll be taken to the part of our website which deals with this issue and shows you how to take the next step.